So this week in the Sacred Gathering, we're going to look at another section out of the Gospel of Luke. This one is kind of right on the heels of one of those readings we did last week. And last week we looked at a reading in which Jesus was just kind of reminding us that we need to reprioritize. If the kingdom is in fact true, if God is among us and still at work, are we valuing the things that God values? Are we valuing the people that God values? Is the world working in a way in which God is in charge? His kingdom is more important than ours is. And so, as he is continuing his journey to the cross, this next section of teaching is right on the heels of that, and that's going to be an important kind of part of context for what I'm looking at. So I'm looking in Luke chapter 12, starting with verse 49. I came to cast fire on the earth, and would that it were already kindled. I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how great is my distress until it is accomplished. Do you think I have come to give peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. For from now on in one house there will be 5 divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you say at once, a shower is coming, and so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? So, the first part here, when he says, right, I came to cast fire on the earth and would that it was already kindled. I think pretty much everybody in Jesus' day would have been thinking about some of these kind of judgment passages in the Old Testament in which fire comes, in which the Messiah comes to kind of judge the earth, the day of the Lord, this sort of thing. This is one of the main topics of discussion everyone is having. This is the main thing that is on everyone's mind. And so when we start talking fire, they're immediately going to go kind of towards that. And I would say that we tend to think of fire, whether in terms of like a forest fire or burning someone down, we have an association with fire kind of primarily as something that is destructive, right? Something that can just destroy things, as beautiful and fascinating as it is. We think of it, again, in terms of kind of destruction and something that was there is now burned down. It's got kind of a negative connotation. They wouldn't have necessarily had quite as negative a connotation because they're recognizing that there is anything that is that is flammable, that's combustible, will in fact burn away. But they also would have been a lot more familiar with the idea of fire as a purifying element. They're much more used to fire being used to purify metal or other things. It's going to burn some things away, kind of this dross, but it's also a major element in making something more pure, if it's the case of a metal used in like jewelry or something, but also can make something harder and more useful. Say you're making steel or charring the inside of a barrel, that sort of thing. And so there's a kind of an element of this fire being something that's going to burn away that which is not as important or is not as pure, and something better coming out on the other side. And so I think actually at this point in Jesus' ministry, one of the important kind of questions is, what exactly is dross? What is going to be combustible and burn away? And what is in need of purification? What is something that is good but isn't good enough for the kingdom yet? Are our priorities aligned with God's? And I actually think that that is kind of where the rest of this discussion is going to go. Also want to just point out again, fire is considered kind of apocalyptic in this conversation, but we're also in the Gospel of Luke. So fire is always going to be kind of a hint, an association with the Holy Spirit. And we're going to see that in this section. We're going to see this in the Gospel of Luke as it continues in the book of Acts, in which kind of this kingdom, this realization of so much what Jesus is talking about becomes possible only through the Holy Spirit. I also just want to say real quick, this baptism discussion has to do with what it cost Jesus. The baptism, the idea of drowning or being completely overwhelmed, which is the kind of root of the idea of baptism, is clearly this messianic king coming, this reworking, this purification is not something that's just an abstract idea for Jesus. It is going to cost him dearly because, again, he will be the glorified king. He will be a Messiah beyond their greatest hopes and expectations. It just isn't going to be on the terms most of us prefer to think of. God is the crucified God. Christ is the crucified Son before he is the glorified God, the glorified Son, the glorified Christ, right? And so that plays into this as well. So again, these two next topics feel like they're a little off, but I think they have to do with this idea of purification, this idea of Jesus kind of burning away the dross to show us what the kingdom priorities really are, right? And so the first one of these is, like, you think I've come to bring peace? No, I tell you, I bring division. And then he lays that out very specifically across kind of lines of kinship, of across these lines of these family units, of these houses. And this is kind of a baffling thing, right? Isn't Jesus the Prince of Peace? Isn't that kind of one of his nicknames? Didn't he come to be a reconciler and restore to people? And the answer is yes, but here I don't think Jesus is celebrating by any means what his presence is going to do, but he's just announcing, look, this process of purification, of realigning values, of doing things God's way rather than our way, is not going to be undisputed. That is why he was crucified, right? Those who were powerful, those who were teachers, those who had a very specific way they thought we should follow God, are going to use that power and that influence to kill Jesus because they see him as dangerous, they see him as a threat. And that is something that is always held over Jesus' followers' heads. It's something that we have to be aware of, and kind of lining up his sight in this story is one of the greatest values of his culture at the time, and that is this idea of kinship. You put your family before anyone else. You put your extended family before anyone else. You are loyal to them, and of course, this is going to extend all the way to this kind of tribal group that is Israel. Our people, our kinship group is the most important. Our tribe is prioritized over them. And so when the Messiah comes, of course, he's going to protect his tribe. He's one of us. He is going to glorify and lift up his people, and he's going to judge them. Whoever them is, the outsiders, the Gentiles, those that don't agree with us, those dirty, filthy sinners, etc., right? And Jesus is just pointing out very bluntly, that is not what I'm here for. I am not here to kind of reaffirm, and I'm not here to make kinship in the way that you think of it as the highest priority. Your comforts, your understanding are not is not as high a priority in the kingdom as maybe you want it to be. And so does Jesus believe in unity? Absolutely. Does Jesus come to affirm community and kinship? Absolutely. But Jesus isn't here to affirm family as they understood it, or often as we understand it. Jesus is there to create a completely new family. And I think there are some parallels to this stuff in kind of our modern approach, right? Just like we are usually, in Jesus' day, they were looking for a Messiah who could kind of affirm and lift up them in their way of being in the world. We do a very similar thing nowadays. That's what we're doing when we are fighting over power and politics and influence locally, right? We are trying to make sure our kind of vision of life, our way of being in the world, is that one that is championed. And we expect God to fall in line in some ways and be all about our priorities and our vision, about our comfort, about our affirmation. And yet we get a Messiah who is going to be crucified before he's glorified, and teaches a very different way. Same way, we may not value kind of kinship and tribe in quite the same way they did back in the day, though there are some parallels. But maybe it's, this idea of family values, and that God supports, again, a certain understanding of the world and certain priorities and certain ways of being. And yet again, if Jesus challenged their kind of too small kinship because it didn't include enough people, maybe some of our values, some of our family values and things that we associate with God also come in line with the target of what he's talking of, needing some dross burned off, some purification. The conversation after that feels like it takes a bit of a weird turn, but I think it's doing the exact same thing. Just like we can maybe approach the idea of Messiah, just like we can maybe approach the idea of family and kinship, over prioritizing those things against what Jesus wants us to prioritize, we now have an example of what I would argue is prioritizing control, right? He talks about the weather. He says, do you guys, you know how to listen to the wind, you know how to watch the clouds and those sorts of things. Again, it's not just about knowing the weather for their convenience. This is an agrarian society. Knowing how the weather works is going to help them have their crops correctly. It's going to help them eat. Or maybe think of some of his disciples who are fishermen, right? Knowing how to read the weather is going to save their lives at times. They know when they need to get off the water. They know when they can put out and when they can't. They know what the fish will be doing based on that, right? This weather watching for them is a method of control. It's a method of them being able to protect and get what they want out of life. What are some of the things that we might prioritize instead? I think one of them is information. You know, like we're always looking for information. We're always looking for comprehension. We think we can solve problems if we get the right people, the right experts, the right technology, the right system, the right solution, the right amount of money, the right knowledge, whatever, right? Those are the things we are looking to. And Jesus is kind of saying the same thing. I don't think he's saying that those things are inherently bad. It's that those things have been reprioritized. We want control kind of at all costs rather than trusting Jesus, rather than trusting kind of his priorities, his way of being in the world. And so I think we need to humbly ask ourselves, are we any better at reading the times? Do we really know what is going on in the world? Everybody's got a theory. Everybody's got ideas on where we should be going as society or in the world. But do we really understand what it is that God is up to, what God's priorities are, what God is doing in the world? Or would we prefer God to kind of get in line with our ideas? Again, Jesus bluntly says, I am not here to affirm your priorities. I'm here to teach you something brand new. And so again, where we want something to lift up our way of being and our strength in the world, just like they wanted a Messiah who was going to be political in certain ways, Jesus offers instead this crucified Messiah, the one who invites people to come and suffer for the sake of the world, that God can be glorified and bring about healing and wholeness. We want to offer kind of a version of family or kinship where the people that look and think like us get prioritized the rest of the world. And Jesus throws the gates wide open, inviting any who are willing to be whole and healed and included. And I think, even just our practices of everyday life, our desire for control, Jesus does affirm some of those things, right? We need food. We have work to do in such things. It's not a bad thing to want to do those things well. Jesus affirms the everyday all the time. He doesn't talk in terms of the spiritual being more important than the physical. And yet, at the same time, he's going to be deeply disruptive of the ways we do things. And so it's an important passage. It's kind of a scary passage, unless, of course, we know who God is. We trust Jesus' heart and recognition that, yes, he is coming to burn some things down and to purify some things, because in the end, he believes in us and our participation. He believes in what the world truly can be in all its wholeness and goodness in a way we're often not brave enough to follow. So kind of a scary apocalyptic passage, but it's one that I think just deeply pushes home that theme we saw from Hebrews last week as well of, will we have faith? Will we trust what God is up to in the world? Do we trust his heart and what he wants for us, maybe beyond sometimes even our own understandings?